Jussie Smollett may end up in jail. When I say may, that's because he has not been sentenced yet. He faces up to 20 years in prison because he was convicted on 5 of the 6 counts brought against him. According to the New York Times, a jury in Chicago found the actor Jussie Smollett guilty on Thursday of falsely reporting to the police he had been the victim of a racist and homophobic assault in 2019, an attack investigators concluded was a hoax directed by the actor himself. With its finding, after more than 9 hours of deliberation, the 12-person jury indicated it had chosen to believe the accounts of 2 brothers who testified that Mr. Smollett had asked them to mildly injure him as part of a publicity stunt. I love that the New York Times has to phrase it this way. The jury chose to believe there was no evidence for any other account. Like Jussie Smollett literally had no plausible account of anything that happened other than what actually was the truth. It wasn't just that the defense had no defense. It was that the defense's attempts at a defense were so laughably bad that there was no possible way for a rational human being to come to any other conclusion than that Jussie Smollett had staged an attack on Jussie Smollett. And frankly, I'm glad to live in a country. I think Jussie Smollett should be very glad to live in a country where his attacker is going to prison. I mean, it's sad that they're going to be sharing a cell, but it's kind of the best thing that ever happened in the history of mankind. According to the New York Times, Mr. Smollett, wearing a dark gray suit and a blue shirt, sat upright in his chair, hands clasped, staring directly at the jury just after the verdict was read. Daniel Webb, the special prosecutor who handled the case, said afterwards Smollett only made matters worse by continuing to stand by his account at trial. Though that of course, is very, very, very true. Okay, so in a second, we're going to go through the entire history of the Jussie Smollett saga because it is so illuminating about what America's media life is right now, how the elites view the rest of the country, the massive disconnect between this little bubble of people who will believe any narrative that casts America in an evil, racist light and actual reality where people like Jussie Smollett in American society, celebrities who are double minorities because he's gay and black, they're not treated as outcasts in American society. Far from it. Okay, the fact is that Jussie Smollett was believed and cherished and treated as a victim because there are elites in our society who believe that everyone like Jussie Smollett is a victim and therefore should receive special benefit, should receive special treatment. Okay, and the reality, again, is very different when it comes to crime stories from what the media would have you believe. Wilfred Riley, who's a college professor who writes for Commentary Magazine, sometimes really great. Wilfred Riley is a black commentator on race and crime. He says, the media tried to say that the Jussie Smollett incident, as originally narrated by Jussie Smollett, was indicative of broader trends in American public life. He tweets out this morning, but there are real Jussie Smolletts. Violent interracial crime involving blacks and whites is about 3% of all serious crime. And of that 3%, about 80% is black on white. Yep. But that's not the narrative that the media are attempting to propagate. And so Jussie Smollett became a national news story with everyone just, we have to believe him, even though it was the least plausible story ever. Okay, it was a super non-plausible story. It was as plausible as the story that Michael Jackson had naturally sired children, right? There are stories that just aren't plausible. And you can look at them. And you can see right from the outset that they're not plausible. And maybe you hold back. Maybe you say, okay, I'm not going to jump on this one. I'm just going to wait and see what evidence emerges. But our entire media infrastructure, our entire political infrastructure went into overdrive to try and use the Smollett incident as the tip of the evil American iceberg. And even now, the media are trying to buy this back. It's hysterical. Even now, the media are trying to say, well, conservatives, this doesn't mean that your case is helped. Great piece today from Jahan Jones over at MSNBC titled, What Conservatives Should Realize Before They Relish the Jussie Smollett Verdict. Oh, tell me, sir. I wait with bated breath. The actor Jussie Smollett has been found guilty of lying to police in 2019 when he claimed he was the victim of a racist, homophobic attack in Chicago, bringing to a close one of the more bizarre high-profile celebrity cases in recent memory, says this columnist for MSNBC. Smollett told police in 2019 he had been assaulted by 2 masked white men who shouted pro-Trump slogans, poured a bleach-like substance on him, tied a rope around his neck. But 2 brothers, Abimbola and Olabingo Usendero, testified that Smollett asked them to stage the attack. Abimbola Usendero, who said he was friends with Smollett at the time, accused the actor of orchestrating the incident to draw media attention to actual hate mail he received in 2019. By the way, I have doubts about the actual hate mail in 2019, given the fact that Jussie Smollett made it a massive issue. So why aren't people paying attention to this hate mail that I received that basically looks like I signed it? Olabinjo Usendero told prosecutors Smollett had this crazy idea of getting attacked by 2 Trump supporters so he could post it on social media. Smollett held throughout the trial the incident was not a hoax. Nonetheless, the strange, seemingly ever-changing details in the case have provided nearly 3 years' worth of material for comedians and online commentators. Some of it has been quite funny, in fact, says this columnist for MSNBC. Even more comical, in my view, was the predictable conservative outrage over Smollett's allegations. Conservatives took to social media in 2019 to express outrage over the dropped charges. How dare someone make such a heinous claim about followers of their dear leader, they screeched. Violent masked white guys who shout Trump slogans and use chemical agents to attack victims? Many on the right shamed those of us who knew such a claim was totally plausible. And then the January 6th insurrection happened. Yes, this is their defense to everything is January 6th. Or alternatively, you are so unbelievably full of crap. Okay, that is the alternative. The alternative is you guys are unbelievably full of crap. There's no defense to the fact that you fell for this because it was ridiculous from the outset. Oliver Darcy over at Brian Stelter's newsletter on CNN is also trying to play the game where conservatives are wrong for chortling over the outcome of this verdict. He says that it's really bad because this means that conservatives are going to use this in order to attack media credibility. Guys, you don't need any help. You've destroyed your own credibility. You are Thelma and Louise over that cliff in that caddy flying. Okay, you don't need our help for gravity to apply. Gravity just applies to you. You were stupid enough to buy all of this. Brian Stelter went on air and portrayed this as fact. And now you guys are upset because conservatives are pointing out that you have no credibility and you guys are a mockery. Okay, so it's time to go back in time just a little bit to the original Jussie Smollett story. So you'll remember that Jussie Smollett was an actor on a show called Empire. Empire, of course, is a show that is largely watched by Black Americans. Not a lot of racist whites watching Empire. That's just not a thing. So Jussie Smollett was staying in Chicago, and he told CNN, okay, this is the way CNN reported this story, January 16th, 2020. Empire actor Jussie Smollett was attacked in the early morning hours on Tuesday in what Chicago police are calling a possible hate crime. Smollett was attacked by two people who were yelling out racial and homophobic slurs and poured an unknown chemical substance on the victim, police said. One of Smollett's alleged attackers also put a rope around his neck, according to police. Both fled the scene. Smollett took himself to Northwestern Hospital and is in good condition, authorities said. As of Tuesday evening, a Chicago police spokesperson told CNN that investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the reported attack occurred and have found no still images or video from security cameras of the incident. The only image of Smollett police obtained from security cameras was inside a Subway sandwich shop near the location of the reported crime. The actor was seen standing alone. Chicago police detectives continue to investigate the serious allegations, according to the PD spokesperson Anthony Guglielmi. Okay, this is the original report. Guglielmi said detective teams would broaden their search, work around the clock to look for video on traffic cameras, buses, and neighboring streets. Okay, so the way that Jussie Smollett narrated this crime, it was 2 a.m. in Chicago, in the middle of a polar vortex. It was like 0 degrees outside. And Jussie was hungry for a Subway sandwich. So first of all, this is an implausible story. I don't know a single human being exists on planet Earth who has ever gotten up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. in a polar vortex to go to Subway. That is really not credible. First of all, no slur on Subway, but they had a kosher Subway in LA for a little while. It's not good. It's certainly not the kind of food that drives you out at 2 a.m. in a polar vortex. But don't worry, the sandwich will come back into the story momentarily. So Jussie goes down to Subway. He's happily munching on his sandwich as he walks the streets of Chicago. And we're talking about like kind of the Tony area of Chicago. Okay, this is like the bluest area of the blue areas of Chicago. He's walking the streets, 2 a.m., when suddenly, out of nowhere, he's attacked by two red-hatted, presumably MAGA-hatted, white men. And they shout at him that he is a F-word, N-word. Right? F-word for gay person, N-word for black person. From Empire. So apparently, we have found the only true Trump supporters on planet Earth. This is the original story that was deemed, as you'll see, deemed unbelievably credible by everyone. These are the only two Trump supporters who have ever seen Empire or heard of Empire, as it turns out. And they're huge Empire fans, except they really hate that there's a black gay guy in a show that's entirely about black people. So they start yelling slurs, Jussie. And then one of them takes a clothesline and wraps it around Jussie's neck, and he begins to fight them. And then another one of them takes a bottle of a bleach-like substance and starts pouring it all over Jussie. Nobody knows why. Doesn't even make any internal sense, this story. And finally, Jussie fights his way free. And heroically, never loses the sandwich. Heroically, when he emerges, there's tape now. Yeah, we found tape. When he emerges from underneath the area where he is being attacked by these MAGA-hatted, by Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, after this happens, Jussie emerges with his Subway sandwich clutched in. So first of all, just got to say, Subway is missing an unbelievable branding opportunity. Because if you are Subway, this guy loves Subway sandwiches so much that he is willing to not only fake a racial attack, but hold on to the sandwich during the racial attack, undermining his entire case, and eventually landing himself in prison because he loves Subway that much. Forget Jared. I mean, you probably should forget Jared. It turns out that got awkward. But Jussie, as a substitution for Jared, pretty solid stuff. Okay, fine. So then Jussie goes home, and he calls the cops. And the cops show up, and when they arrive, Jussie is still wearing the clothesline around his neck, which is an odd fashion choice. And the police are like, can we have your phone, sir, so that we can see your location? And he's like, no. Well, that's suspicious. He's like, no, you can't see my phone. Of course, because he'd been texting the two guys that he actually, hired. And by the way, Jussie is such an idiot that when Jussie hired people to commit a crime against him, he did it by check. To commit a federal crime, he signed to commit a federal hate crime, he signed a check to make that happen for himself, which is just the best. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys like button with clicks and logic. I'd watch that. Make it happen, gang.